welcome to Telesur English. I am Estefania Bravo, and this is From the South. President Maduro will be departing for Russia within the coming hours and will be meeting with President Putin during the official visit. He made the announcement during statements alongside his vice president and education minister as they provided an update on the start of the school year. The president said that he and Russian officials will review all dynamics of the bilateral relationship and will look for new ways to intensify cooperation and exchange between the peoples of the two nations on the construction of a multipolar world. Venezuela's national dialogue table between the government and the opposition continues to make advancements. On Monday, 8 complementary dialogue tables were set up to move forward with partial accords over the next 20 days before being presented to the Venezuelan people. After the meeting, the communications minister spoke about the government's long-standing willingness to resolve issues via dialogue and their commitment for peace.
We have always maintained an unbreakable position in support of dialogue and of peaceful solutions to consolidate peace in our land. And we have succeeded at this, as Venezuela is a country of peace, despite the permanent threats lobbied by extremist parties, by the international right wing, and North American imperialism. On the 16th of September, when we established the National Dialogue Table, we made it clear that the President insists all doors are open to reach bilateral agreements. But we can see that the Venezuelan right wing has many disagreements among themselves. And one of the main obstacles we've faced so far has been these many splits that exist within the right-wing parties. So we hope they can resolve their own issues behind closed doors, and that they can separate themselves somewhat from the administration of Donald Trump.
Opposition lawmaker Timoteo Zambrano spoke about the need for the U.S. to lift economic sanctions if they want to support elections in Venezuela.
We have clearly rejected the economic sanctions. We did so in the September 16 agreement. We have also said that any election in Venezuela cannot be held under these sanctions. So that's a matter we have to resolve, not because we have the capacity to lift these sanctions, but we believe the US government has to negotiate with the Venezuelan government to resolve the issue. The removal of these sanctions is the main request of the Venezuelan government, while our main request is establishing a date to hold elections. Personally, I think there must be negotiations soon between both governments. If the US continues to support elections in Venezuela, they have the responsibility to negotiate the lifting of the sanctions. I believe the already announced parliamentary elections are in danger because it's impossible to campaign or hold elections under these sanctions.
The Political Council of the Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of Our America, otherwise known as ALBA-TCP bloc, met a short time ago at the UN in New York. Foreign ministers of both Cuba and Venezuela participated, as well as the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The Council expressed respect for the principles of international law and stressed the importance in providing assistance among nations when they have a need in the areas of vision, health, housing, and food. Leaders from nearly 200 countries attended the United Nations Summit on Climate Change in New York. They are facing increasing pressure from citizens around the world to cut greenhouse gas emissions and slow global warming. Ahead of the meeting, the World Meteorological Organization said climate change is accelerating as carbon emissions continue to rise. It said the world is lagging far behind the goals of the Paris Climate Accord. On Friday, the World Climate Strike, led by school students, saw millions of people around the world demand immediate action from governments. The Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley, addressed the summit on the need for immediate action to be taken by the world's government to fight global warming. She warned that any global temperature rise above 1.5 degrees Celsius would be catastrophic for small island states.
Mr. Secretary General, forgive me for my bluntness as I am constrained by the 180 seconds to speak on the fate and needs of 20% of the United Nations membership as we seek to save our countries and our people from the ravages of devastating hurricanes, droughts, and fires, and the insidious slow onset of acidification, ocean acidification, and sea level rise. The science is clear, and the evidence is even clearer, that the lives of our people have been lost and properties abandoned, and these tell the story far better than any speech we can make in this great hall. The AOSIS, the Alliance of Small Island States, needs to keep temperatures increases in this global community to less than 1.5 to stay alive. Not to thrive, but to stay alive. In other words, 2 degrees needs to be taken off the table once and for all.
A Haitian senator opened fire on protesters outside the country's parliament on Monday, wounding 2 people, including a photographer. Senator Jean-Marie Ralph FtS claimed he opened fire to defend himself from protesters. Protesters gathered outside parliament as the Senate met to confirm Fritz William Michel as the new prime minister. Crippling fuel shortages and corruption allegations have triggered months of anti-government protests, calling for President Jovenel Moïse to step down.
To the people of Haiti, keep mobilizing. We do not need a truce in this battle because hunger persists. You have misery and hunger in your homes. Criminals get no truce either. They keep hurting us. Let there be no truce from now until Moïse leaves power.
We are enduring a situation that is unbearable and horrible. We are here to finish it off. The situation in Haiti is not easy. Companies have closed. Schools are not operating. Children are at home. It's a horrible situation.
Meanwhile, on Monday evening, angry protesters in the capital Port-au-Prince forced their way into the Haiti Union Bank and set it on fire. The bank is owned by Clifford Brandt, a businessman with close ties to President Jovenel Moïse. The protesters accuse Brandt's bank of facilitating corruption and embezzlement of public funds by government officials. Brandt was sentenced to 15 years in prison in 2015 for running a kidnapping and ransom operation. His sentence was, however, annulled by the Supreme Court in 2018. And in Haiti's northern region, protesters burned down a clinic belonging to a foundation run by Senate President Carl Cantaf. The protesters are opposed to the Senate's second attempt to approve the appointment of Fritz William Michel as Prime Minister. President Jovenel Moïse has been pushing for Michel's approval despite opposition by the majority of Haitians. Moving on, in Brazil, protests against the extremist military tactics and killings in Rio de Janeiro favelas continued. On Monday, hundreds of protesters gathered in front of the Rio de Janeiro Legislative Assembly to demonstrate against the killing of an 8-year-old child by the state. Agatha Felix was killed by military police in Rio de Janeiro's Complexo Alemão on Friday night during a confrontation between military police and alleged drug traffickers. In 2019 alone, 16 children have been shot by police in Rio de Janeiro. Many say the security policies of the state governor and ally of President Jair Bolsonaro have made the situation worse.
How long do we have to bury our children? The life of a black child is worth less than the life of a white child. That is the contradiction we have in this racist society.
They murdered another black child. That's the 8th death this year. There are already 18 children shot this year alone in Rio de Janeiro, and we can't take it anymore. We say enough. We want a security policy that protects us and our children, and not that kills us every day.
We'll be right back. Stay with us.
A review of the world news that investigates, incites analysis, and induces criticism, because every event has a context.
Pusimos el punto en I.
Dot in the I. Saturdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back to From the South. Now overseas, as members of the South African Society of Banking Officials, the country's largest financial union will hold a nationwide strike on Friday in protest against planned job cuts. According to the union's general secretary, more than 40,000 workers are expected to down tools on the 27th of September. The strike is in response to plans by the country's three largest banks to retrench almost 10,000 workers across the country. Across Liberia, more than 11,000 health workers held a nationwide protest over pay and a lack of equipment. Pregnant women also blocked a key intersection in the eastern part of Monrovia because they were turned away from a clinic due to the strike. According to the Health Workers Association, most employees have not been paid for 4 months and do not have basic equipment like disposable gloves.
Our reason for blocking the street is that we came here at the hospital at 4 o'clock in the morning and the people said they will not treat us because the government has not paid them for 4 months.
We want to tell George Weah that he owes the people. Let him pay the people and let the people hear about us. We must not be suffering like this.
In Nicaragua, President Daniel Ortega and Vice President Rosario Murillo led a celebration at the Plaza de la Revolución in recognition of the 40th anniversary of the National Police. The president highlighted the triumphs of the police force, which has been able to guarantee security in a way no other country in the region has in recent years. At the same time, he remarked on the violence which began in 2018 when members of the police force were attacked and in some cases killed, as sectors of the opposition destroyed health centers and other public buildings. Police officers and members from Cuba, Russia, Bolivia, Venezuela, and other close neighbors participated in the activity.
On this 40th anniversary, all honor and all glory of the homeland to the National Police for its 40th anniversary.
We not only commemorate the 40 years of struggles and victories of our national police, we are remembering and commemorating the founding and our commander, Tomás Borge, with all of his enthusiasm and vitality, designing a police of the people and at the service of the people.
The government of Nicaragua has denounced attempts by the opposition to destabilize the country. Let's take a closer look.
This is how the streets of the country look. Normality has returned to Nicaragua after the failed coup attempt in April 2018. Yet, the country's opposition continue trying to disrupt the peace.
Every moment is appropriate when it comes to driving the country to the right direction. So we will remain here, persevering in this fight that has turned into a fight of resistance.
Meanwhile, this is the atmosphere in other parts of the capital. For 22 years now, Inés has owned this restaurant in one of the city's most popular avenues. She starts working early in the morning.
They have to understand that they cannot and will not, because the majority of us wants to live in peace, to work in peace. We want a free, healthy, sovereign country. We do not need to submit to these small groups that are destroying our country. That's all they do. They destroy.
Sociologist Bismarck Ciero says there is clear evidence of who's financing these attacks.
The people of Nicaragua can't be fooled twice. What do I want to say with this? That these groups try to convince Nicaraguans through social media, but now they are not believing it. Now the people are here now. They are aware of the situation. That is why we don't see so much movement on the streets like the first time. People behind this are not the leaders. As a leader would have moved hundreds.
For its part, the government of Nicaragua is calling for peace. They are developing social projects to build a better economy for all citizens.
This week, the Venezuelan Vice President and Foreign Minister will be at the United Nations in New York to hand over more than 13 million signatures against the U.S. blockade of the country. The signatures were delivered to the Vice President at a march this weekend.
It's young people like these who've raised their voices the loudest with a clear message for President Donald Trump.
We will beat these imperialist attacks. No more Trump. Trump and his white supremacists should take their hands off Venezuela. Venezuela is a free country and we will follow the path of complete independence. Long live Venezuela.
This wasn't just another march, but a protest against the U.S. economic sanctions, which the Venezuelan opposition is supporting. They don't understand how the opposition can talk about helping the Venezuelan people when they're blockading the country.
We are marching to deliver the signatures of the Venezuelan people against this criminal blockade, which the United States is tightening in a very aggressive way. What's more, they are boycotting and trying to prevent the dialogue called by the government with sectors of the opposition. The United States refuses to recognize the efforts of the Venezuelan people to solve our own problems.
This is a people that has been struggling in the streets for 20 years, and they're not about to give up. That was their message as they escorted the trucks carrying 13,287,742 signatures to the vice president.
We don't want any more blockade. We are free, independent people, and we will keep fighting.
And so they arrived with their boxes full of resistance and the desire for peace, demanding respect from the United States towards Venezuela.
Along with our foreign minister, we will go to the United Nations this week to hand over the signatures from the brave people of Venezuela. And we also thank the people of Cuba who joined us with their signatures. This is a common fight for two revolutions, the revolution of Martí, Fidel and Che, and the revolution of Bolívar and Chávez. It is one shared battle against the imperial powers.
For over a month now, people have been lining up across Venezuela to sign up to this No More Trump campaign against the sanctions.
While Trinidad and Tobago is still reeling from the effects of Tropical Storm Karen, citizens on the Twin Island Republic are being warned to brace for more torrential rains. The warning comes just 24 hours after intense rain flooded streets, brought down trees and caused power outages on the island of Tobago. Rough seas also damaged Tobago's jetty and nearby boats. Floodwaters also swept through the Scarborough compound of the National Water Company, TN-TEC. Over 20 of its utility vehicles were underwater, and in West Trinidad, several yachts were destroyed by raging seas. Water also swept several homes and vehicles, leaving many trapped. The Met Office says heavy showers are expected to arrive this Monday afternoon and continue into the night.
And it's normal. Mommy.
The intense rains caused landslides throughout Tobago and Trinidad for one family in the community of Champs-Fleurs. That reality came pretty close to home. The terrifying moment was captured on camera.
Mommy?
As Tropical Storm Karen heads towards the U.S. and British Virgin Islands, Tropical Storm Lorenzo has formed in the eastern Atlantic. In an update on Monday, the U.S. National Hurricane Center said Tropical Depression 13 has been upgraded to Tropical Storm Lorenzo. Lorenzo is likely to become the next hurricane of the 2019 season and joins Jerry and Karen in the Atlantic Basin. This effectively means there's a trio of active tropical storms spinning in the basin at the same time. Lorenzo is expected to intensify very quickly. The Bahamas government has appointed a new disaster management minister. Iram Lewis was sworn in as head of the newly established Ministry of Disaster Preparedness, Management and Reconstruction. Bahamas Prime Minister Hubert Minnis had announced on Sunday the establishment of a new ministry responsible for coordinating recovery of the Abacus and Grand Bahama following the devastation caused by Hurricane Dorian through the northwest of the Atlantic archipelago. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Contenders in the recently ended Israeli elections have held their first meeting to discuss the formation of a unity government. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who is under pressure after failing to garner enough votes to form a government, met with his rival Blue and White Party leader Benny Gantz for the first time. After the election in Jerusalem, Israeli President Reuven Rivlin mediated between the two rivals. Both Gantz and Netanyahu are vying to become prime minister after receiving the backing of minority parties.
We wanted to form a right-wing government. Unfortunately, this was not possible. We simply didn't get enough votes to do so. Gantz on his part wanted to form a government from the opposing side, and he also didn't get enough votes to do so. Therefore, the only government that can be formed under these circumstances is a white unity government with both of us. And the only way to reach such a government is to sit down and talk.
British travel firm Thomas Cook collapsed on Monday, leaving over 600,000 travelers stranded and sparking the UK's biggest repatriation since the Second World War. The British government launched emergency plans to bring over 150,000 travelers back home from destinations including Bulgaria, Cuba, Turkey, and the United States. Hundreds of passengers have checked into a rescue flight at Malta's Valletta airport, while in Tunisia, around 4,500 tourists wait to be repatriated. The 178-year-old group has blamed Brexit uncertainty for a recent drop in bookings and declared bankruptcy after failing to secure $250 million from private investors.
Some main concerns is kind of the knock-on effects this will have for the UK economy. It's also quite a bad sign when one airline goes bust like this, but also presents new opportunities for other airlines to kind of take over. But because Thomas Cook is kind of a staple British brand, it brings in concern about whether foreign investors will want to come in, and obviously with Brexit looming and everything like that, it does bring in some economic uncertainties.
At least 20 people are reported to have been killed and dozens others injured in a new wave of riots in Papua, Indonesia. According to officials, about 65 people were injured and 300 arrested when students clashed with security forces outside a university in the latest rounds of demonstrations against alleged racism by Indonesian authorities. Tension between locals and the central government has existed in Papua since Indonesia took control of the former Dutch colony in 1963. Chinese President Xi Jinping has called on Israel and Palestine to exercise restraint and solve their differences through dialogue to safeguard regional peace and stability. Xi made the appeal during a meeting with Iraqi Prime Minister Adel Abdul Mahdi in Beijing, where they discussed the situation in the Middle East and Gulf region. Xi also said China is ready to work with Iraq to push their bilateral strategic partnership to new heights. Meanwhile, Iraq says it is committed to easing tensions and avoiding war and vowed to enhance communication and coordination with China in this regard. Iran has released a British-flagged tanker seized more than 2 months ago. The Stena Impero tanker was seized in mid-July as it passed through the Strait of Hormuz after Iranian officials said it had violated maritime regulations. The release comes a day before Iranian President Hassan Rouhani is set to meet with British Prime Minister Boris Johnson on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in New York, and also following the release of an Iranian supertanker off the coast of Gibraltar that the UK authorities accused of carrying oil to be sold to Syria in breach of EU sanctions. And just as we go, we leave you with tunes from the women's musical group of Brazil's landless movement. They joined thousands at the March for Peace this weekend in Caracas in solidarity with the people of Venezuela. And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.